section by tagging your question with #runner. So without further ado, let me introduce Edison Eskeets and Jim Kristofic.
Greetings. A lot to share. I think it's important to really look at the history. You know, there's an old saying where people would say, there's an old saying where what happened yesterday is not important today. From my standpoint, I think it is critical. Whether it's this business, school, finances, or whatever, it's a vital thing in our lives. This book title, we actually decided to change the title a bit to Send a Runner at One Time. Also, we're talking about a message in it. On my end, this book was in preparation for 40 years. So it's been a long time. There are many avenues that were covered through the years. Part of it is the athletics, the running part of it. Part of it is just collectively looking at the Native history. In addition, looking at the region, the placement, and of course the core people of the. Hello?
You're still with us, yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because it's showing me uncertain buttons here. So the book has been in preparation for 40 years. I think the stronghold of this is really looking at the long walk. For many of us here, especially the Navajo traditional folks, the long walk is very, very, very sensitive. At times it is untouched. Sometimes you get into that subject, there's not much said. The fact that it is, you know, I don't know if this is the right word. There's taboos in it. Maybe it's the uncertainty of the event, which lends itself into the spiritual aspects. So meeting with the elders, storytellers, medicine folks, I was able to gain so much information. At the very end, it was a go. Again, you know, it's one of those things where you don't mess around with it. But I received the green light to do so. And it's about the language, it's about humanities, it's about the people. In general, it's about the people around the globe. It's really treatment of one another, the treaties, the land, the language as well. So it's addressing all these components into one. There's a lot of betrayals. There's a lot of movement. There's the allies of the folks here in the Southwest, the government, the policy making. All of that is very inclusive in this book. It is unique how this transpired. The history of the Southwest, as well as my running. My running is intertwined. It's kind of nicely laced into the story as a whole. There's a bit of humor as well. I think for all of us, it is critical to maintain the, I think to not speak into the long walk. I just don't want to lose it. I think a lot has been lost. As we see the language today, we're losing a little bit of it at a time. It's not only us. I mean, look at the Irish. They're losing their language too. And I'm sure there are other groups as well. So maintaining that, I think, is vital. It is really vital to the people across the board. A lot of this, as I was in development of the story, if you will, I was able to look at the emergence of the Navajo people. There's a whole section of that storyline as well, talking about the people, where the Navajo folks were able to speak to the animals as well. The language itself, therefore we have the arts. The art speaks to us very well. It tells the story of the people at large. I have folks come my way and they ask me what was the highlight of the book. There's so many. It's hard to say, but personally, from my end, with all the preparation for 40 years, after I completed the run, I was able to cut my long hair. I had long hair. At the very end of the run, I was able to take my hair and cut it. And there's a meaning to it. You know, with words you can speak, you can be articulate, you can be fancy with words and whatnot. But action is something else as well. With words, you're able to lie. You can lie with that. But with the physical movement, when you cut your hair, I validated my event as a completion. Again, 40 years of it, and that split moment of cutting the hair, it's only less than 5 seconds. It said a lot, and it's at the end of the book too. And it goes beyond that. There's more to that as well. In addition to this, I also did 4 major ultra running. They're 100 miles, 200 miles, 300 miles, over 400 miles. And those events were in preparation. These 4 events, major events, was actually going to the sacred mountains of the Navajo people. It is Blanca, Colorado, and Mount Taylor in New Mexico, San Francisco Peaks here in Flagstaff, well, to the west of us, and then of course Hesperus. And that gave me a lot of incentives. You know, my first run was just, I guess it's innate. It was in my system to address the need for the people, and I really didn't understand the full content. But after the run, it slowly transpired. It slowly composed itself to a meaningful understanding. So for the 4 runs, it was in preparation. When I did my last of those 4 runs, I was like, yes, thank God it's done. And then the long walk came around, and that was even more intense. Again, the approvals to get that through. I met with the folks across the Navajo Reservation, Chapter House. I even met with the Thunder Rock, the president, and the supporting individuals to announce my concerns and issues. And so, and again, I think the book itself, what I covered is only maybe 5% of the story. There's so much more, and we can spend a lot of time in it. Again, it interlates with so-called tradition. My run at the very start of my very last run, which is from Chinle to Santa Fe, New Mexico, it's 330 miles. It took me 15 days. It's compared to almost a marathon a day. And of course, the Southwest, the elements, um, the earth, wind, fire, and water. My gosh, I mean, what a powerful source of energy. It can deplete you. You know, a marathon for people in general, marathon is 26 miles, 385 yards. When you run one of those, you need 1 month to completely recover. But I ran 15 of these so-called marathons and back to back. And you know, I don't encourage people to do that, but again, the preparation was intense. The athleticism is beyond uh, just a normal activity, if you will. Um, Again, I coach myself at one time, and you know, I always tell my runners, you know, there's a fine line. When you get to that fine line and you step over, it could be, you could be asking for trouble. Uh, so there are different things in it. At the very end, especially with this long walk, run, at the very end of this event, even though I use running as a vehicle, if you will, um, it had nothing to do with athleticism. For me, it was more of a dance for 330 miles. Um, a lot of prayers were dispensed um, uh, to address, and of course, I call it the great ones. The great ones are into the constellations, the stars, the moon, the sun, the clouds, and then to the crust. The prayers are certainly voiced out into these segments of our universe. And so it's for me, it was a powerful preparation through time.
I'm actually going to jump in with a question here, if that's okay.
Sure.
I'm not sure if it's a question or more so a comment. As I said, I've read the book, and the book is divided. The chapters are divided into days: day 1, day 2, up to day 15. And
Yeah.
in day 2, you mentioned that the process of completing this run is about man moving through time. And I find it really interesting how that plays out in the book, because not only are we moving through your run, but we're also moving through parts of history and your life. Can you speak a little bit to kind of how the book came to be in this format where your run is kind of interspersed with different parts of history?
Of course, our indigenous group here, we have a time frame, and those events certainly transpired. You'll see the trading posts, you'll see the Spaniards coming in, the Europeans coming in. So that is well structured. It's a history that was viewed, and the experience are in it. My run actually went through the region. Chinle is a place, so we started with Chinle. We looked at the time frame, and then as we moved along, we added other. So it's with regions as well. That intertwines with the community, the people, and the movement, if you will, interlaced with my running. I met with Jim. Jim has done a fantastic composition to this. We met probably 10 years ago here at the Hubble Trading Post, and we talked. And I mentioned that I was working on my last run, and we talked a little bit. And I think just the artistry, because I'm an artist as well, and he is a writer. And I'm sure he does other art forms, other mediums, if you will. So we were able to communicate, and it had that nice little flow. And I said, I mentioned documentaries, a narrative with it, and it just kind of clicked. We never said, do this, do that. It just transpired. And also, again, 40 years of it, the very last run, I kept saying, we're just going through the motion. This run is done. It's over. It's all we got to do is just go with the flow, which was really neat. It's just that personal energy and the stories. There's a lot of spiritual content too. I don't know how to explain it. I think we tried. Some of those found in the book, but that the spiritual aspect is a challenging one. But I think you'll be able to pull those out of the book.
So then I've got one question from one of our staff members, which is about the running through the various regions, and if there was a particular stretch of this run that you were most looking forward to, or that the landscape was your favorite, that something to that effect.
The whole way, from the start to the finish. And again, like it was a dance for me. It was a beautiful dance. The very beginning, we had a rug by a master weaver. And this rug was composed of the storyline. And of course, it had moccasins and a kilt, bare-chested, long hair. There's no Nike. It was very traditional. I was able to lay the rug out, and a Navajo basket went on top of it with corn in it. And words were extended to the great ones, to the people, to humanities, and then of course I applied the corn to the people that were there as well as myself. I don't know if you have some Navajo people in there. The rug is referred to as a yasakat, and that was kind of the gift, the opening. So the weaving is a part of it. Now, if you go to Chinle, there's Spider Rock. Now, the Spider Rock, it is understood that Spider Rock is where Spider Woman taught the Navajos how to weave in mythology. So all of these are connected. I mean, we can spend probably 365 days just speaking about Spider Woman. So those are a part of it. And some of the things that occurred as I left, was ready to leave Chinle. There's telephone poles that are, I don't know, that are lining the road. And I noticed a hawk sitting and watching. And it's like, oh my God, and it's a huge one too. And then the second one, there's another hawk sitting. And it's like, wait a minute, that's the second one. The third post, there's another one. The fourth, there was another one. And then I looked back, it's like, wait a minute, is this hawk hopping the poles? And no, they're all there. Four directions, 4 mountains, 4 words, 4 colors. Yeah, it was quite impressive.
No, that is remarkable. Let's see. Referring to some of my notes, I do have a few people on the Zoom call. If you would like to post questions to the chat, please do that at your convenience. Let's see. I'm a little curious if the timing of this run was, I guess, planned. It is touched on a little bit in like some of the press releases and touched on a bit in the book, that this run that you do happens in 2018, which is the 150th anniversary of the Treaty of 1868. And I know it's mentioned briefly in the book that there was another, I'm not sure if it was a similar run, but one that had been organized going from Fort Sumner to Window Rock, also in commemoration of the treaty. And I'm just kind of curious how the timing of all of that kind of plays together, and if how intentional it was, and what your thoughts on that were.
And again, I mentioned the years that I spent on this. It's understood that you don't go back to Fort Sumner, where the hardship, the encampment, death was evident. You don't bring that back from Fort Sumner to the reservation. And, you know, I thought about it at one time, this is years ago, so I was able to study it. And there's a possibility that this can happen because I don't want to bring something back. So instead, I actually went to where Kit Carson went into Chinle. That's where it started. I reversed it and I went to Santa Fe because Santa Fe, the plaza, the government, if you will, the policy making is there. That's the entity. So I took a message from Chinle to Santa Fe. And the message was in Navajo, Hatish Biniyeh. Hati Biniyeh. That was it. I mean, I could have drove and 4 hours and said, why? But no, to deliver this message, really. Why? I know other folks, they had another program where they went to Fort Sumner and they were running relays, horses, bicycles, and they came back to the reservation. I didn't do that. I did not do that.
I have a question that just came through Facebook, which is about how you decided which route to take as you were running, how you kind of fit into your journey.
That was the route. The first walk, there's, I think, 52 walks that actually occurred. The first one actually went to Santa Fe. And when the Navajos were marched through Santa Fe downtown, it was the captors were proud. It was a display. It was saying, look what we did. And then they marched to through Pecos into Las Vegas, and then up north a little bit, and then they came back down. And now these were orchestrated in such a way to actually lose some of the people through the elements, starvation, water, the Rio Grande, people drowned on horrific stories, even at the Fort Sumner where people were running out of food, and those who were very desperate, they ended up eating their moccasins. They had to boil it and then eat it. And stories like that is just horrifying. Yeah. Not to mention, it talks about, you know, families, especially the girls that were sacrificed to the soldiers, and the list goes on. And at times there was a birth where there's a half non-white and half native, especially at the very end as they were marching back into the reservation. Kids were born, some, and because they were half, they were stoned to death, and they're buried along the ridges of the plateaus and the mesas, if you will. Horrifying. And the energy is still there. I know some folks will be able to get that sense from the environment and the surroundings. I know I did.
I got another question that came through. Have you ever considered making this an annual event to raise awareness? And I'm guessing from this question, for you, this seemed like kind of an individual journey. I think this question is more about bringing more people in to kind of commemorate the long walk and remember the suffering of those who endured it.
Just because of the sensitivity, it was a challenge. But through the years, I was able to compose and piece the overall content into one, where it has a valid confirmation. It's profound. So I did it. It's done. It's beautiful, and my work is done. Now, if there's another event, here's the template. Take this template. It's done. I actually exhausted my energy. I am this, the mindset, um, all the because I have to. Here's something. Um, it's not just the Southwest, the Americas from Alaska to Chile, the indigenous group. At one time, there were over 60 million indigenous groups. Today, it's almost 6 million. And so it is so important to tell your story in a proper way, And I think this run can be done again. Again, it has to be well structured. It has to have the validity. It's not for the fun of it. It's really for the educational aspect of Navajo, so you can continue your dances. Um, there's one ceremony we don't do anymore, which was founded in this last run. It's called Jada. Jada was an identified medicine family or an individual. They were the messengers. We're talking prior to the horses and the wagons. They were the vehicle. They carried messages, medicine, news. So they founded a runner, and they were gifted with prayers, songs, and tools, if you will. And they would go to them, him or her, and appeal to them. If there's a need for medicine, they go to them, you give a token, um, uh, food, whatever, and you ask for this medicine to be picked up. It might be 40 miles away, and the person will run. Uh, and they just don't pick it up, too. They are fulfill how to approach the plant, whether there's a tobacco, a prayer, or a song, or a corn pollen that is returned to nature before you take things. So we don't do that anymore. Jada. Now there's another word, it's called jada. That's an antelope. That's a runner. Yeah. Even the word, it's and I think I might be the only person saying this. I actually shared it for the last few years now, but Navajo, we know them as Navajo, sometimes Navajo, sometimes Diné, and sometimes we fight for those terminology to identify who we are. We're actually Nabahi. Nabahi is a word, and it has nothing to do with warrior. Because I met some older folks, when I say Nabahi, the first thing they say is military. It's not. Nabahi is actually the seeker. You're seeking medicine. You're seeking water. You're seeking shelter. That was us. That was us. So, there's a lot of corrections in this too. Um, I'm going to go into the arts. Navajo Weaving. Um, the books will indicate that the Navajo Weavings actually started around 1630s or something like that, up to date, based on the Spaniards bringing in the Churro sheep. Well, I agree with that to a point. In quantities, yes. The sheep came, and Churro sheep was designed um, to increase population in the most harsh terrain, and the Southwest is just one of those. And the population just grew. And so a lot of weavings were done after the night. Again, the Spaniards coming in the 1600s. But on the native side, on the Navajo side, I mentioned Hesperus, and this is going back prior to the influx of the Europeans. Hesperus, if you translate that into Navajo, the Bensa is what you say, the Bensa. So I'll translate the Bensa into English. You're saying sheep. Navajos were weaving prior to the influx of the Europeans. And if you get a medicine man in one of those pouches, when they're opening for the healing ceremony, in one of those pouches, there's a sheep. Yeah. So, so there's, again, the nurturing and the honesty in this is well founded in this run. I'm so proud of it. It's actually very, very emotional too. I don't know how many times I fell apart. It's so emotional. It's really tough. Tough stuff.
We've got another question that came in from one of our staff members. She wants to know the word that you used for seekers. She's curious how it's spelled and spoken. She's one of the staff members.
I think you can spell it in different ways, but to make it simple, so it's phonetic, if you will, I just spell it Navahe.
Okay. Nice.
So it's easy. You can actually pronounce it. You can spell it differently too. Now, even the language, because this is a huge part. The runs, the long walk, because we almost lost everything, and the language is a part of it. When the emergence were happening, somewhere in that time frame, the language was up to was on the table. I mean, there's many others. You're talking about farming, you're talking about the losses and all that, but the language, Bluebird was a part of it. Bluebird, as I mentioned, Navajos were able to talk to the animals at one time. They were able to communicate. There's a little section towards the end talking about my mom, the Geico. That's kind of a reflection to that. And it was slated what to consider to maintain the language. At the very end, with the 12 entities, which is found on the basket. If you look at the Navajo basket, there are 12 points on the outside, 6 points on the inside. The 12 points are the 12 entities. One of those points is human, or energies. And the 6 points inside is the four sacred mountains. And then the other two is the doorway to the, and so even that basket has a profound message in it. Going back to the language now. Again, it was being discussed. It was slated whether to write the language. At the very end, it was set aside. And the understanding was when you write, you're able to lie. You'll be able to lie. So they said, no, we don't want to do that. But when you speak from the inner soul, from your heart, from your mind, and your well-being. And so you speak honestly. So when you go to a reservation, and you can see it too, people from the East Coast will come and try to strike a dialogue. It'll take a few minutes, maybe even a couple days. Because, still there. So you want to say something, but you want to say it in honesty. It's still there.
Right. I have one final question, just kind of round us out, if that's okay. There are a lot of pretty individual stories in sort of the historical portions of the book, and I'm just curious. And I don't know if this is maybe more of a question for both you and Jim to answer together. But how the research went in finding some of those stories, or how commonly those stories were maybe passed to you that you heard of. I'm not originally from New Mexico, so I learned a lot in this book that I did not know before about the history of the region and the peoples in this area. So I'm just curious how a lot of those more individualized stories came to your knowledge.
There are a lot of books written about the Southwest, and Jim himself is he's a history buff, so he has a lot of that knowledge in that arena. From my end, I think it's well. I was a teacher as well, so I know some of those as well. Probably more so on the native perspective, and I spent quite a few times throughout the. I lived in New England, the Midwest, and here in the Southwest. I grew up in the Southwest. I'm also very, very traditional, but I'm also trying to keep with mainstream society at the same time. And you know, because there's one thing I noticed, it's kind of elementary. I always, in an open forum, I will say, you know, some days we want to be native, the next day we want to be with the mainstream. Why not just use both? There's nothing wrong with it. You know, if you have both, great, fantastic.
We'll open up for one final call for questions. Otherwise, we'll start wrapping up. Especially from our fellow Zoom attendees. All right. So, all right, we have a very interesting. I think a lot of people will be drawn to the book. We do have copies coming to the library. They've been back ordered, so they are coming. So we got at least 2 copies. So please do check out the book. But I will give us a brief review of what else is coming up for the rest of the month. Thank you again to Edison Eskeets for sharing Send a Runner and Navajo Honors the Long Walk. The Octavia Flynn Public Library here in Gallup invites you to join us for live and recorded presentations every day during the month of May. You can find the schedule of events on our website at ofpl.online, and please make sure to follow us on Facebook. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date on all of our library events and programming. And on behalf of the Octavia Flynn Public Library, thank you for watching.